Hi, folks. Welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from, to this new episode of the RiseUp Radio. And today I have with me Loren Sanders. Loren, welcome to this new episode of the RiseUp Radio.
Happy to be here.
All right. So, folks, quick introductions. I'm the founder and CEO of Risely. As you all know by now, maybe Risely is an AI co-pilot for leadership development, and we are helping democratize leadership development in organizations and bring scale into your efforts. Loren, would you like to introduce yourself briefly to our audience today?
Sure. I'm Loren Sanders. I am an author and keynote speaker, as well as the owner of Roxlo Coaching and Consulting. I spend a lot of my time coaching and consulting in the empathy and the L&D space, specifically helping leaders who don't feel like they're very empathetic to get better at it. And really, my tagline is I help you move your team from toxic to transformative.
It's a very important topic, no?
Yes, definitely an important topic.
Right. So, folks, I think you have already guessed what the topic is. So, the topic today is using empathy to strengthen organizations. And I don't think we can have a better expert than Loren to talk about this. So, Loren, I'm going to jump straight right in, right? Let's first, talk about the elephant in the room, empathy. Empathy at work, what is it and what's the impact that it can bring for organizations?
And I'm going to simplify this as much as possible because I think it's important that we think about empathy holistically. And when we think about it that way, it's really the ability to understand and share perspectives of other people in a professional setting, even when those ideas are not yours. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that involves recognizing other people's emotions, their perspectives, their challenges, and responding to those with care and understanding. It's more than just being nice, which is always nice when you're nice,
Yeah.
but it's an active skill that can enhance communication, collaboration, and overall workplace culture. And the impacts are better communication, strong team collaboration, better engagement, because we know it's about engagement scores, right, all the time, and better leadership. And teams solve problems better, work environments are healthier, and it's backed by research. In fact, there's a study by Business Solver. It's called the State of the Workplace Empathy Report, and it consistently shows that organizations that have higher levels of empathy outperform their competitors
Mm-hmm.
in almost every way, including productivity and retention. So I have a question for you, which
Sure.
is what has been your experience in this area?
Oh, wow. I think I've had experiences on both the spectrums, which is, working with managers or leaders who were super empathetic versus managers and leaders who were toxic and hence, not very empathetic at all. Right. So I think I was lucky at the start of my career that I ended up working with a manager who was a very, very empathetic manager, right? And that was probably the best start that I could have ever had to my career. I felt good about myself in that stint. I think I grew a lot, not only in terms of my stature in the organization, but how I thought about work in general, right? How I thought about the overall value that I could bring to the organization. I think that was a very a big change right when I was starting my career. Right, and then obviously, I think the other part that's the part I want to forget. So I think we can leave that aside.
We're not talking about toxic leaders. No,
Exactly.
a different topic, different podcast, different day.
Yes. Right. So, talking about empathy, right? It's more important than ever today, with increasing burnout and different generations working in, especially with COVID coming in, right? A hybrid workforce where people were not able to balance work and life together, and then organizations calling people back into offices, and then constantly work environment is changing, right? How do you see the importance of empathy or the topic of empathy evolving at the workplace, and especially when you said that for some leaders it is really hard to be empathetic, right? And probably they see empathy as a counter to performance, which actually it's not. But what's your take on that?
Well, since I wrote a book called Empathy is Not a Weakness and Other Stories from the Edge, I completely agree. The conversation around empathy at work is really relevant today more than ever. The first thing I want to address is the fact that burnout is rising. And the burnout levels have been steadily climbing, especially in high pressure industries. And COVID just made it worse because now people are dealing with the stress from work life imbalance. People still worry about health. Health anxiety is a real thing when we think about COVID and now flu season. And then the shift from remote or hybrid to back to the office. That creates a lot of opinions, a lot of stressors. And empathy is really a critical tool in combating burnout. When leaders recognize and address both the emotional and the psychological needs of their teams, it helps to mitigate some of that exhaustion and anxiety and disengagement. All of those are things that fuel burnout. In fact, there's an HBR, Harvard Business Review study, showing that 61% of employees feel burned out today. And that empathetic leadership plays a big part in alleviating that. Then when we talk about the next generation, and I'm going to let you decide for yourself if that's Gen Z or Gen Alpha, but your next generation workforce is really becoming the dominant demographic at work. And they place a strong emphasis on work-life balance. They place a strong emphasis on feeling good about their mental health, their emotional well-being, and empathy is crucial to engage and retain these workers. Then they're much more likely to stay when they're treated with care. They want leaders who listen to their concerns. They want leaders who are inclusive. They want an emotionally intelligent culture. And there's so much research in the world that shows that empathy is valued over traditional leadership models. And when you throw COVID-19 in there and the post-COVID nature of the world, the pandemic fundamentally altered how people work. People transitioned into those remote or hybrid models. And now all of a sudden, hey, it's time to come back. Everybody belongs in the office. We couldn't do it anymore. It's not good for companies. It's not good for things. And the reality is when you do that, people don't feel trusted. And trust is huge across every generation. And this change has made empathy even more essential. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's one
Got
of
a
the
little
cornerstones.
passionate.
That's one of the cornerstones of empathy, right? Isn't it? I mean, if there's trust missing, then there is no empathy in the relationship at the end.
Right. It's not a soft skill. I'll argue all day it's not a soft skill. It's a strategic advantage. And when we understand what employees go through and we respond accordingly, we can create a culture of care that reduces burnout and meets the values of the newer generational expectations. And it builds people's ability to be resilient during change. It will empower leaders to make human-centered decisions. And those can improve your productivity, your business outcomes, and make sure your employees are mentally and emotionally healthy.
So, Loren, just a follow-up question on that, right? You work with a lot of clients. You work with a lot of organizations, right?
I do.
Do you have a case for us where you saw that leaders were resistant to change earlier on, but once they started to see what empathy could bring in their organization, they just lapped it up, and then the results were transformative. I'm sure you would have something of that sort in your mind.
It's funny. Today, I actually posted on LinkedIn about leaders that we choose to follow and what we should take away from them that we want to exemplify and what we shouldn't. And I talk to and coach a lot of leaders that say, look, I don't know how I got here. This is not who I wanted to be. I don't want to be this, top down screaming at my people leader, but somehow I got here.
It just happened.
And it happens
over 30 years, over 20 years, or because of all the conditioning that has been brought upon, right?
Right. And if you are reporting into a toxic leader, it's kind of contagious, right? That's the culture. But it depends on if you think culture is top down or bottom up. I'll argue all day long that culture is actually bottom up. But really the difference between an empathetic and unempathetic manager is an empathetic manager will listen first. They have that listen first approach, not just for what's said, but can I hear the emotion behind the words and get to
Hmm.
the root cause?
Hmm.
Can I take the time to understand by asking people questions? And can I provide a thoughtful response or even more
Yeah.
questions
Yeah.
rather than jumping to conclusions or interrupting somebody?
Yeah.
They recognize and respond to emotional cues.
Hmm.
I can tell if you're stressed. I can tell if you feel overwhelmed. I
Yeah.
can ask you questions if you're not performing.
Right.
They tailor their approach to the unique needs of each individual
Yeah.
person
Right.
and understand that different people might need different types of leadership. They're able to flex across the team and give each person what they need. And the team members then feel comfortable sharing their challenges or struggles without fear of judgment.
Hmm.
They create a culture of trust and safety and
Yeah.
advocate for people's well being. And they give feedback in a way that's solution oriented. Because don't hear me saying just be nice. One of the conversations I have on a regular basis with leaders struggling with empathy is, well, I didn't give them the feedback because I didn't
I
think it
wanted to
would
be
be
nice.
empathetic to tell
I
them,
wanted to be
they
nice.
suck at their job. But it's unempathetic not to give
Not to
people
give feedback,
feedback they
actually.
need in order to help them grow. As an
Absolutely.
empathetic leader, you focus
Absolutely.
on the solutions,
Correct.
not assigning blame.
Yeah.
And you're mindful of how it sounds, what it feels like, how criticism might affect somebody's morale. It's
Right.
a tool, not a punishment.
Yeah. I think you've already preempted my next question and answered a bit of it, but I'm going to ask the question to be able to make sure that we have the entire information around it. So my question was, how do you differentiate between empathetic and unempathetic managers? I think you've already given us some traits of empathetic managers. So if there are any missing still that you want to cover, you want to share with us, would love to know.
I think we covered empathetic managers
Yeah.
pretty well. If you're an unempathetic manager, and this is a real opportunity to check yourself on some of these things, um, communication, is it a one-way street? Does
Hmm.
it focus on tasks and results only?
Hmm.
Do you listen to concerns but don't act on them?
Hmm.
Are you more interested in getting your point across
Hmm.
than understanding what the employee is saying? I
Hmm.
call this being right over being kind.
Hmm.
So, a couple of different things to think about is, do you have an emotionally dismissive approach?
Hmm.
If a team member says, I'm frustrated or I'm tired or
Hmm.
I'm overwhelmed,
Hmm.
are you dismissing those feelings as
Yeah.
irrelevant or obstacles to getting work done?
Hmm.
And do you respond with things like, well, everybody's stressed out. That's just part of the job. That makes people feel unheard and
Totally.
undervalued.
Totally.
If you apply the same management principles and tactics to every team member without
Hmm.
considering their needs or their circumstances, that's not empathetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, are you focusing on productivity over people? Yes, we still have to get work done,
Hmm.
but
People are
employees are
important.
not, yeah, people are not just resources to
Yeah.
achieve goals. There is a human element we have to
Correct.
think about.
Correct.
And when we do, we create psychological safety. And so
Yeah.
you'll see lack of trust and lack of safety in unempathetic teams.
Yeah.
And then if you think the end game for feedback is punitive,
Hmm.
an unempathetic manager will give feedback that feels harsh
Yeah.
or punitive and not
Yeah.
supportive. Instead of helping somebody improve, you get criticized and no actionable advice or emotional
Right.
support.
Right. Because a lot of times when people think that giving feedback is punitive, it's typically because they don't know how to give proper feedback, right? Or they don't know what the core reason behind feedback is, right? Or they're misaligned in their
Right.
thought process, isn't it?
And you manage people even now. What's been your approach to being intentional about being an empathetic leader?
I think I basically follow two major principles, Lauren, and I don't know if I'm doing it correct or not, right? And so my first principle that I typically follow is looking at an individual's emotional state of mind, right? And how are they sounding today? I mean, are they as energetic as they typically are? Trying to look at their body language, trying to look at their tones, and understanding their motivation levels, because I understand not everyone would be motivated all the time, right? So when I see that somebody is feeling a little low, I try to have a conversation with them to understand what's bothering them. If it is something that I can help them with, or anybody else can help them with, try to provide that support in that sense, right? Or at least hear them out in terms of what's bothering them primarily, right? I think when I was an individual contributor, I think good times are easy, right? When you're performing well, sometimes actually you get bogged down by your own performance pressure, right? You have set a performance pressure in your mind that, hey, I should be performing at this level, but I'm not able to. I'm only able to perform here, right? And that's where you start to put a lot of pressure on yourself, and that happened to me in the past. And I can see sometimes that happens to some of my team members, and I tell them that, hey, it's okay, you can relax a bit, because you're not going to be performing at this level always, right? Things are not always in your control, and you are bound to fail at the end of the day, right? So in a way, trying to make them comfortable with failure, and sharing my past experiences where I was in that situation, so that they can probably learn from it. I think that's one approach that I try. The other approach that I consciously take in order to be empathetic with my team is to be invested in their growth, which is consciously looking at how I can help them grow in not only vertically in terms of career positions, but their skill sets, right? Am I being able to give them diverse tasks or not, right? Am I being able to help them build new skills or not? Are they feeling stagnant in what they're doing, right? Or maybe even trying to understand that, hey, they've outgrown the position that they are currently doing, and maybe outside the company might be a better role that they should evaluate or explore, right? So yeah, that's always a difficult conversation to have, because you don't want to lose good people. But at the end of the day, if that's good for them, then you have to detach yourself from that outcome, and do what's best for them at the end of the day. So I think these are the two basic principles that I try to follow consciously when trying to deal with my team.
I like that you brought up energy. Noticing someone's energy is so telling.
It is.
And I think being intentionally empathetic as a leader requires deliberate action and a
Yeah,
mindset that prioritizes understanding and valuing other
yeah,
people's perspectives.
yeah,
And it's hard to do,
yeah.
which is why there are so many leaders that aren't empathetic. It takes
Right,
work. If you're
right,
not practicing it, you're getting worse.
right, right. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Cool. So let's come back to training and supporting managers, right? So when you talk of training and supporting managers to be empathetic, it's a very valuable point that more and more L&D teams and HR folks should be focusing on. What are some actions that you would suggest to get this right in organizations?
As a learning and development professional, I hear often that we need a training on empathy. And what we don't need is a training on empathy. We spend way too much time telling people what it is. One of the reasons I wrote the book is because everyone writes books about what empathy is.
Hmm,
Nobody tells you how to get it.
hmm,
That's why my book's a little bit different. But we
hmm,
need to embed empathy into leadership development programs.
hmm.
It's not, a module, it's
Yep.
a core competency, and it should be pulled through every single leadership
Ongoing.
development
It is an
effort.
ongoing effort. Yeah.
I think that we need to provide empathy coaching for managers
Hmm,
so they can get personalized feedback and guidance on how to incorporate it into their leadership
hmm,
style.
hmm.
Part of that would be getting a coach for your leaders that can help managers reflect on their communication style or
Yeah,
reflect on communications or actions that they've taken with employees
yeah.
and provide practical empathy building techniques like asking more open ended questions,
Hmm, hmm,
improving the literacy of emotion. So we
hmm.
don't even talk about, what emotions are, what they mean,
Yeah.
and helping people engage in active listening, just pulling it through
Hmm,
everything.
hmm.
360-degree feedback with an empathy lens is another really good thing
Okay.
um, that'll allow managers to get
Hmm.
feedback about how
Right.
well they're doing it from their peers, their direct
Right.
reports, their supervisors, and even asking questions like, does this manager actively listen to their team members'
Hmm,
concerns? Does this manager respond with understanding and flexibility when faced with personal challenges or team members, and I'm just spitballing these questions. So we'll need to make sure if you decide to embed something like that, that the way that you ask the question doesn't have any bias in it. And it will be even more effective when it's modeled by senior leaders. The C-suite needs to demonstrate empathy in their interactions because they set the tone.
Yeah. Right. And where do you think failures typically happen to be able to deploy this approach? Where do organizations miss? Is it more on the intent side, or more on the investment side, or more on the commitment side that, hey, a deeper commitment is gonna need deeper investment as well?
Funny that you ask it that way. I'll usually start a session with a group of leaders asking them how many times has your intent and your action not matched? Or have you ever had an experience where your intent and your action haven't matched? Raise your hand. And if somebody doesn't have their hand raised, I'll say, if your hand is not up right now, you're lying to me. Everybody has had that experience. Most managers.
At least once, or
yes,
correct.
Again, nobody starts out with the intent of being a
Right.
jerk, right? Most people start out with the intent of being empathetic at the core.
Correct.
But then there's limitations
Unless you're a
that
psychopath,
get in the
which is a different
way.
story altogether.
Well, yeah, that's another podcast. There we go. We have one on toxic leaders, one on
Yep.
psychopaths.
Yep.
But there are limitations.
True.
Maybe your organization sees empathy as weak, or somebody,
Right.
wishy-washy if they're using empathy.
Right.
Maybe in the culture, empathy isn't common, and that's not how we do things.
That's again
and
very
there
top down,
aren't.
no, Lauren? That's again very top down.
It is
these thought processes that, hey, it's a weakness, it's not a weakness, it's a very top down view.
Very top down thinking. Where it gets really interesting is when there are absolutely no role models in an organization to learn from. That's tragic.
Yeah.
Or you've got tons of people out in the world that work in empathetic roles, and they spend all day long being empathetic to customers and patients and other things, and they're exhausted. And so who gets the brunt of the non-empathetic behavior is everybody else around that person, because they've got empathy fatigue. But where I see it most often in leadership in a corporate structure is time constraints prevent me from being empathetic, or I don't know what to do because there's limited time and I need to make sure X gets done. Do you think, being a tech person, do you think that tech has the opportunity to bridge the gap between intent and action when it comes to empathy?
Oh, absolutely. I think tech has a major role to play, especially with AI coming in, right? I think platforms, I'm not only talking about Risely, but I think the new age platforms can actually bring an opportunity for managers, leaders to practice empathy in a very safe space, right? Where there's a very non-judgmental space that you can practice. For example, can you role play a conversation with your team member and assess how empathetic you are, and somebody can give you feedback around it, right? You can actually do it with a coach, but the challenge is that coaching sessions are very expensive, and organizations can't extend that to every manager in the organization. But with tech, you can actually scale. For example, a new manager who doesn't know how to have a good conversation with a team member, they can actually practice conversations and learn how to be more empathetic in their conversation, or maybe even how to give feedback which is not punitive, rather thinking about building an individual's growth, or looking at that angle. So I think that's where primarily tech has a big role to play, which is providing that space for managers to practice and make mistakes, right? And try out, get feedback, and that can be basically delivered at scale to every manager, rather than only a handful or the senior most in organizations primarily.
And I love the ability of AI to get smarter with the inputs that we give it.
Yep.
So that it really becomes personalized to the human being and their challenges with empathy.
Correct. Absolutely. And you know what? So yeah, that's basically at the end of the game is, right? Are you getting solutions to your problems or not, right? To be able to be empathetic, you learn you learn techniques, and then you need to practice those techniques. and then keep practicing in real life to become better at it, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly.
Right. Awesome. So we're coming towards the end. I just have one final question for you. So what would be a legit effort to build empathy for organizations in organizations look like, right? Where should they start? How would it end? What would be the process in between that an organization should look at?
I think that we need to employ actionable training
Mm-hmm.
because people can intellectually grasp empathy but
Mm-hmm.
struggle to apply it in real time. I think we need to practice with emotionally charged situations,
Mm-hmm.
um, move beyond theory to practical hands on activities that allow people to develop and practice that skill
Mm-hmm.
in as real world as of a scenario as possible to equip them
Yeah.
with the skills and behaviors they need. And I think that tech has a big part to play as it even continues to evolve more
Hmm.
in executing a more empathetic approach once we have the mindset there. So,
Yeah.
first, we have to build the mindset,
Yeah.
and then we have to employ everything else to make it
Correct.
actionable. But with short of the mindset, it's not happening.
Correct. No, absolutely. And I see that as a very strong hybrid approach where, you have that mindset shift that happens, in deep sessions. You learn
Right.
tactics and then you practice in an ongoing manner. I think that continuous learning backed up by, bouts of very expert, manual interventions is basically the way to go, I think. Awesome. Well, there you have it, folks. So this was all about empathy at work. I know it's a huge topic, and we can't do justice in 30 minutes. But that's why you have Loren and you have me. Feel free to reach out to us if you're curious about building empathy in your organization, and we'll be happy to help you craft a program that can be better for your organization. Right, Loren? Any parting comments from you? Last thoughts?
Nope. Sounds exactly as I would have said it myself. So I think you did it a great justice there.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you so much for joining in, folks. Lauren, thank you again for being part of this episode on the Rise Up Radio. Loved having you on the show today and the conversation that we had.
Me too. Loved being here. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right, folks, you take care. Until next time. All right. Bye bye.